They drank from a well that never emptied. At first, it was just thirst, a pull that gnawed at the throat, a dryness that no water could quench. Then the quarter began to thin. Faces sharpened, bodies hollowed. Tools were left mid-task, looms silent, bread half-cut on boards. No one screamed. No one ran. And when they finally lowered the bucket to check the bottom, they found not mud, not water, but fingernails stacked like seeds, teeth arranged in perfect rings, and bone fragments smaller than anyone should have noticed. The well was not a hole. It was a mouth, and it had learned to drink Paris from the inside out. The first sign was not death, but thirst that refused to loosen its grip. It crept into the artisan quarter quietly, settling into mouths and throats like fine dust, turning saliva thick and useless. In the narrow streets where leather was cured and metal hammered, where the air already carried the stink of sweat, smoke, and animal fat, the well stood at the center like an old scar that never closed. Its stone ring was slick with moisture even in dry weather, and when the wind shifted, it exhaled a breath that smelled of rust, rot, and something faintly sweet, like wet coins pressed too long against the tongue. At dawn, before bells called the city awake, the first buckets were lowered. The rope rasped softly against stone, shedding dark fibers that stuck to the hands. When the bucket rose again, it felt heavier than water should allow, tugging back as if reluctant to leave the depths. Men blamed sleep, blamed weak arms, blamed the damp chill that gnawed at joints, yet the rope was always warm, almost fleshy, and the bucket's rim left a slick residue on the skin that took hours to fade. The water inside did not reflect the pale morning sky. It swallowed the light, holding it briefly, then letting it die, its surface trembling as though disturbed by a breath from below. Those who drank felt relief for only a heartbeat. The water slid down the throat with a metallic bitterness that coated the mouth and lingered behind the teeth. It cooled the tongue, but left the body strangely dry, as if the liquid passed through without staying, taking something with it. By mid-morning, lips cracked, throats burned, and the desire to drink returned sharper than before. Children licked their fingers compulsively. Craftsmen paused over their work, swallowing again and again, feeling the inside of their mouths tighten. The well listened. Stone dampened and darkened around its rim, beads of moisture forming patterns that shifted subtly, never quite the same twice. When the bucket descended, faint sounds rose with it, not echoes, not water, but a soft inward dragging noise that made the hair at the nape of the neck lift. Birds avoided the open space around it. Dogs strained at their leashes, whining low, noses wrinkling as if catching a scent carried only by the well's breath. By nightfall, the quarter lay restless. Sleep brought no rest, only the sensation of pressure behind the eyes and a faint internal whisper that seemed to scrape along bone rather than pass through air. Fingers tingled. Nails ached. Teeth felt loose, buzzing with a dull vibration that pulsed in time with the slow creak of the well's rope swaying in the dark. And beneath the stone, far below the reach of buckets and prayers, something tightened, learned the rhythm of thirst, and drank the city one careful swallow at a time. Those who drank did not fall ill in any way that could be named. There was no fever to measure, no rash to point at, no sudden collapse that might have warned the others. Instead, the change came as subtraction. Bodies began to thin as if something had reached inside and gently erased them layer by layer. Cheeks lost their softness first, sinking inward until faces took on a sharp, listening quality. Skin clung more tightly to bone, revealing the delicate architecture beneath, ribs pressing forward like the arches of unfinished cathedrals, beautiful and wrong in their exposure. Clothes loosened without explanation. Belts gained extra holes. Rings slipped from fingers and were found days later near the well, as if the body had shed them deliberately. Eating brought no strength. Bread sat heavy in the stomach, yet left no fullness behind, and meat tasted faintly of iron, even when fresh. The tongue learned the flavor of metal so completely that other tastes dulled and blurred. Those affected drank more, always more, returning to the well with cups, bowls, trembling hands, convinced the next swallow would finally stay. At night, sleep shattered. It no longer arrived as a single descent into darkness, but as a series of shallow sinkings, brief and restless. Dreams fractured into sensations rather than images. There was pressure, steady and intimate, as though fingers pressed gently but firmly from within the skull. There was sound, not heard through ears but carried through the jaw and spine, a faint inward whisper that vibrated inside the bones. It spoke no words, yet it felt deliberate, patient, repeating itself until waking came slick with sweat and dread. Fingers often woke before the rest of the body. They tingled, numb and heavy, nails aching with a dull, persistent throb. Some awoke to find crescents bitten into their own fingertips, teeth having worked unconsciously at flesh during the night. Teeth themselves became unreliable. They buzzed faintly, as if gently loosened, as if testing how easily they might be taken. Gums bled without injury, leaving a copper taste that blended seamlessly with the memory of the well's water. By morning, mirrors revealed unfamiliar faces. Eyes seemed too large for the skulls that held them. Whites tinged faintly yellow, veins standing out in sharp relief. The body still moved, still worked, still breathed, but it did so with the precision of something being hollowed rather than sustained. And always, without fail, the gaze drifted back toward the well. It looked deeper each day, not wider, not larger, but longer, as though the stone throat stretched downward while no one watched. Its interior remained damp even when rain had not fallen, the stones coated with a slick shine that was not water. It reflected torchlight poorly, swallowing illumination the way it swallowed sound. When buckets descended, they seemed to hesitate, swaying slightly as if guided by an unseen current. When they returned, droplets slid down their sides slowly, thick and reluctant, leaving stains that darkened stone and wood alike. Those who tried to avoid the well felt its absence like pain. Their mouths dried painfully, tongues sticking to teeth, throats tightening until swallowing became an effort. They dreamed of depth and narrowing spaces, of being pulled through stone that yielded like flesh. The well entered their thoughts uninvited, appearing in moments of stillness, in the pause between hammer strikes, in the quiet before sleep. It did not call loudly. It did not need to. Its presence pressed inward, shaping desire with the same careful patience it used on bone. The quarter changed in small, unsettling ways. The sound of work dulled, hammers striking with less force, looms clacking more slowly. People moved carefully, conserving energy they did not understand they were losing. Laughter thinned, voices rasped, and coughing became common, dry and unproductive. The air itself seemed heavier near the well, dense with a metallic tang that settled on the back of the tongue and refused to leave. Animals reacted first. Cats avoided the central square entirely, skirting its edges with flattened ears. Birds perched on nearby roofs, but never on the well's stone rim, no matter how tempting the height. Dogs dragged their owners away, claws scraping against stone, whining low in their throats. When forced near, they trembled, noses twitching at a scent that made them recoil. No one spoke openly of fear. Instead, explanations multiplied. Poor harvests, bad meat, damp air, divine testing. Yet none could explain why the thirst remained, why water drawn elsewhere tasted thin and unsatisfying, why only the well's bitterness seemed to reach deep enough to matter. The body learned the wrong lesson quickly. It began to crave the thing that was undoing it. In the quiet hours before dawn, when the streets lay empty and the city breathed shallowly, the well sometimes made sound. Not a splash, not a drip, but a subtle internal movement, like the shifting of weight far below. Stone pressed against stone. Something adjusted itself. Those awake at that hour felt it in their chests, a faint answering pressure, as if the well and their bodies shared a common rhythm. By the time the sun rose, they were already changed again. Lighter, thinner, more willing. And the well waited, dark and patient, its depth never questioned, its hunger learning exactly how much could be taken without stopping the hands that reached for it. Disappearance came without struggle, without noise, without the violence people expected from loss. It arrived as absence. A hammer lay where a hand had released it, balanced improbably on the edge of a workbench. A loom stood silent, its threads drawn tight and humming faintly in the still air, as if waiting for fingers that would never return. Bread was found half-cut on wooden boards, the knife resting exactly where the motion had stopped, crust already drying, the exposed crumb turning dull and gray. Life did not erupt into chaos when people vanished. It simply failed to continue. At first, it was one or two. A cooper who had gone to draw water at dusk and never returned. A tanner whose door stood open at dawn, his fire cold, his tools arranged as they always were. Their neighbors searched nearby streets, then farther, calling names that echoed uselessly against stone. There were no signs of flight, no marks of violence. Beds were undisturbed. Shoes remained by doorways. The city swallowed the gap quietly. Those left behind noticed what remained. A faint metallic odor clung to doorframes and hair, subtle but unmistakable, the same copper tang that hovered around the well. It lingered on clothing, soaked into wood, resisted smoke and soap alike. When people washed their hands after searching, a strange grit gathered beneath their fingernails, dark and oily, leaving thin black lines that no amount of scrubbing could remove. It felt fine as ash, yet heavy, staining skin as if it belonged there. The disappearances followed no pattern that could be named. Young and old vanished alike. Strong bodies and already thinned ones. Those who drank often and those who tried to avoid the well. Yet the empty spaces they left behind formed a shape of their own. The artisan quarter began to hollow, workshop by workshop, house by house, as though something scooped from the center outward, careful not to collapse the edges too quickly. The well's rope told the story more honestly than any witness. Week by week, it shortened. Knots were retied higher, frayed sections cut away, yet still the bucket never struck bottom. The rope slid longer into the stone throat each morning, swallowed without resistance. Men lowered torches tied to cords, watching the light descend until it vanished, not extinguished, simply gone. No splash followed. No echo returned. The depth refused measurement, retreating as if aware of being tested. Those tasked with maintenance noticed other changes. The stone ring around the well grew smoother, polished by touch and moisture until it reflected faces faintly, warped and stretched. The grooves worn by centuries of rope deepened faster than stone should allow, as if softened from within. When palms pressed against the rim, they came away warm, carrying the same faint oil that coated the rope. The well did not leak water. It sweated. The city reacted slowly, as cities do. Notices were posted. Prayers were organized. Explanations hardened into routine. People spoke of plague without symptoms, of thieves clever enough to leave no trace, of divine punishment arriving invisibly. Yet none of these explanations explained the sensation that settled over the quarter like pressure. Streets felt narrower, ceilings lower. Breathing took effort, as if the air itself resisted expansion. Those who searched too long reported the same experience. After hours of calling names, peering into alleys, climbing stairwells, a heaviness would settle behind the eyes. The mouth would dry instantly, tongue thick and useless. The thought of the well would arrive unbidden, sharp and specific, accompanied by the certainty that it held answers. Some found themselves standing before it without recalling the walk there, hands already on the rope, hearts pounding with a mixture of dread and relief. The missing were not found in the river. Nets pulled up nothing but silt and broken wood. The banks yielded no bodies. Graves were dug in expectation and left empty, earth piled beside them like accusations. The dead had always left remains before. Even the river returned what it took. This disappearance offered no such mercy. Homes began to smell wrong. Not of decay, not of death, but of something incomplete. The metallic odor deepened, settling into fabric and hair. It lingered on pillows, on door handles, on children's hands. People began to recognize it instinctively, pausing mid-step when they caught it on the air, hearts tightening as they counted who was present and who was not. The grit beneath fingernails appeared even on those who had not searched. It collected overnight, thin and stubborn, as though the body itself excreted residue it could not keep. Some scraped until skin bled. Others covered their hands, ashamed of the dark lines that marked them as touched by absence. The well stood unchanged in its place, neither guarded nor abandoned. People passed it quickly now, eyes lowered, steps hurried. Yet it pulled at attention relentlessly. Even from a distance, it seemed deeper than the space it occupied, its darkness pressing outward, distorting the edges of vision. Sounds near it behaved strangely. Footsteps dulled. Voices lost their echo. The city's constant murmur thinned to a low internal hum. At night, the disappearances accelerated. Lamps were found burning in empty rooms. Fires died unattended. The silence spread unevenly, block by block, as though something moved beneath the streets, choosing carefully. Those who remained slept poorly, waking to the sensation of being lighter, of having lost something unnamed. Fingertips tingled, teeth buzzed. The same internal whisper threaded through bone, patient and reassuring, promising relief. By the time the quarter's elders admitted the truth had already learned the city's shape. The well's rope hung shorter than ever, coiled neatly beside it, no longer enough. Buckets returned slick and warm, heavier than before. The stone throat glistened with that same unnatural shine. And still, when lowered, the bucket found no bottom, because the depth was no longer below. It was spreading outward, retreating from measurement, teaching Paris how to vanish without resistance, one careful subtraction at a time. When the depths could no longer be folded into the comforting language of illness or pilgrimage, action arrived stripped of ceremony. Orders were given quietly, carried through the corridor like a draft that chilled without warning. The well was to be sealed, its mouth broken open, its depths exposed to light and judgment. The hope was not faith but desperation, the belief that what could be seen might finally be stopped. Stone was chipped away at first with careful restraint. The ring around the well resisted, the masonry damp and slick, tools skidding as though the surface sweated at their touch. Each strike released a smell that thickened the air, rust layered over rot, the sweetness beneath turning sharper the deeper the stone was cut. As the opening widened, moisture seeped outward, not flowing but clinging, coating hands and sleeves with a film that made skin feel briefly numb, then unpleasantly warm. The descent began slowly. Ropes were secured, torches lit, and men lowered themselves into the throat that had refused measurement for so long. The first layers yielded nothing that justified the fear. There was damp masonry slick with slime, stone worn smooth by centuries of use, grooves where rope had passed countless times. Yet even there, the light behaved strangely, swallowed at the edges, as though the darkness pressed inward, narrowing the space around the flame. Lower still, the air changed. It grew dense and resistant, each breath requiring effort, lungs working against a pressure that made swallowing feel like forcing down coins. The metallic taste intensified, coating the mouth, seeping into the sinuses, settling behind the eyes. Sound dulled. Voices above reduced to vibration felt through rope and bone rather than heard. The well closed around them with a quiet intimacy that left no room for doubt. Then the torchlight struck something that was not stone. It was not mud. It was not water. It was order. Fingernails appeared first, pale and curved, stacked carefully like seeds prepared for planting. They were arranged with intention, sorted by size, their edges smoothed, stripped of ragged flesh. The light revealed their faint translucence, the way they caught flame and returned it dull and chalky. Beneath them lay teeth, arranged in rings that followed the curve of the shaft, molars and incisors placed with unsettling precision, enamel gleaming faintly through grime. There were no skulls, no jaws, only what could be taken unnoticed, piece by piece. Bones followed, reduced to their smallest useful fragments. Slivers of phalanges, shaved splinters of longer lengths. Everything broken down, refined, processed until it became unrecognizable as a body and unmistakable as consumption. There was no blood, no marrow, no softness. The well had stripped away anything unnecessary, leaving only proof. The men froze, suspended between stone and revelation. The torch trembled, not from weakness but from the air itself, which pulsed faintly, contracting and releasing in a rhythm that pressed against ribs and throats. The darkness below narrowed, not collapsing but tightening, like a throat working through a swallow. There was no floor, no end. only a gradual convergence of shadow that responded to their weight, to their presence, adjusting with subtle precision. As debris was cleared, more was revealed. The careful order extended downward, repeating itself with variations too numerous to count. Layers of remnants marked time more accurately than any calendar, each ring a season of loss, each stack a measure of patience. The well had not taken at random. It had learned. It had refined its method until nothing was wasted. Those above felt it too. As stone and contents were hauled upward, the rope strained, vibrating with a low, internal hum. Hands blistered instantly, skin reacting as if pressed against heated metal. Buckets returned heavier than they should have been, coated inside with a residue that resisted scraping, leaving blackened streaks that reappeared even after thorough cleaning. The well did not empty. It yielded. With each removal, the air thickened further. Breathing became labored for those below and above alike. Chests tightened. Vision narrowed. Some staggered back from the opening, retching without expelling anything, mouths flooded with the taste of iron and old water. The quarter watched from a distance, drawn by horror, yet unable to look away, sensing that what was revealed was only a fraction of what remained. As the light descended deeper, the pulsing grew stronger. The shaft responded visibly now, stone shifting imperceptibly, narrowing by degrees too small to measure but impossible to ignore. The well did not collapse. It resisted closure by becoming more precise, adjusting its shape to maintain function. It was not a pit. It was a mechanism. When the order came to stop, it arrived too late to matter. The men were hauled out one by one, faces pale, eyes unfocused, hands shaking as if still gripping rope. None spoke. None needed to. The residue clung to them, dark beneath nails, lining creases of skin, marking them as having touched the inside of the thing that had been feeding. The well was filled with rubble and lime, layers poured in hurried succession. Stone dust hung in the air, settling on hair and shoulders like ash. Prayers were murmured, gestures made, symbols traced with trembling hands. The opening disappeared beneath fresh masonry, sealed tight, smoothed over until it resembled ordinary ground. Yet the pressure did not lift. The air remained heavy. The metallic taste lingered. The quarter exhaled cautiously, aware that the work had not ended but merely changed form. Beneath the stone, something adjusted again, its rhythm slowing, its reach expanding laterally now that depth had been denied. The well had been exposed, but not emptied. It had been wounded, but not killed. As night fell, the filled stone glistened faintly, dampness seeping through mortar that had not yet set. Those who passed felt a familiar pull behind the eyes, a dryness in the throat that water could not soothe. Beneath their feet, far below the sealed mouth, the narrowing dark continued to pulse, patient and exact, carrying the weight of the men above and learning how best to take them next. The well was filled methodically, as though care itself might undo what had been learned beneath the stone. Cart after cart of rubble was tipped into the opening, broken masonry and street debris tumbling down into the dark with dull, unsatisfying sounds. Lime followed, poured until the air burned the lungs and eyes watered, until the stone ring steamed faintly in the cold. Prayers were spoken not once, but repeatedly, layered thick as mortar, their words pressed into the space with the hope that sound might seal what matter could not. When the final stones were set and the surface smooth, the quarter was declared clean. For a time, the declaration held. Fear loosened its grip just enough for routine to return. Shops reopened. Hammers rang again, louder than before, as if noise itself were a ward. Children were allowed back into the streets. The place where the well had stood became an ordinary patch of ground, walked over without pause, its danger buried beneath stone and belief. People spoke of survival, of endurance, of a darkness past. Then the cellars began to taste wrong. Water drawn from barrels and shallow pits carried the same bitterness that once clung to the tongue after drinking from the well. It was faint at first, dismissed as damp rot or bad storage, but it sharpened quickly, acquiring that unmistakable metallic edge. The taste spread unevenly, appearing in one house and not its neighbor, then vanishing only to return stronger days later. Those who drank spat and rinsed their mouths. yet the flavor lingered, settling into teeth and gums with familiar persistence. The river followed. Its surface looked unchanged, gray and slow, but fishermen complained that the water coated their mouths with copper. Fish pulled from the current tasted wrong even when fresh, their flesh carrying a bitterness that no fire could burn away. Nets came up heavier than before, not with catch, but with resistance, as though the water itself pulled back. The river had learned the same lesson the well once taught. More unsettling were the sensations felt by those who had never approached the well at all. They woke with dry mouths and tight chests, with that same inward pulling that had once marked the first drinkers. The pressure behind the eyes returned, subtle and intimate. Fingertips tingled, nails ached, teeth buzzed faintly in the jaw, testing their hold. The city no longer required proximity. The habit had spread. Walls began to speak at night, not in sound but in movement. Wood creaked and cracked as if drying too quickly, though the air was damp. Beams shifted under their own weight, groaning in slow, deliberate rhythms that repeated night after night. Floors vibrated faintly beneath bare feet. Some claimed to feel it while lying in bed, a gentle, steady draw beneath the spine, as if the ground itself breathed inward. The quarter prospered on the surface. Trade increased. New buildings rose where old ones had thinned. Stone was cut and set with confidence. Arches lifted, walls thickened. Yet beneath that growth, something else expanded as well. Foundations settled unevenly, not sinking so much as hollowing. Cellars felt larger than their measurements allowed, corners receding subtly when not watched directly. The city's bones adjusted themselves around an absence that grew more organized with time. The smell returned, not localized but ambient. That faint metallic odor drifted through streets at dawn and dusk, settling into cloth and hair. People stopped noticing it consciously, yet their bodies reacted all the same. Throats tightened. Swallowing became habitual. Hands strayed to mouths unconsciously, fingers pressed against teeth as if counting them. The grit beneath fingernails reappeared, fine and dark, even on those who scrubbed until skin broke. The place where the well had been filled behaved strangely. Rainwater never pooled there. Snow melted faster. Stones set into the ground loosened repeatedly, requiring repair. Animals avoided it instinctively, stepping around the spot as though it radiated discomfort. At night, the ground there felt warm to the touch, faintly yielding beneath pressure, as if the earth had not fully accepted its burden. Those who slept near it dreamed of depth, not falling, not drowning, but narrowing spaces that pressed gently inward, shaping rather than crushing. They woke lighter than before, not in weight but in substance, as though something essential had been pared away. Eating restored nothing. Drinking only sharpened the sense of need. The city authorities pointed to prosperity as proof of health. Buildings stood. Markets thrived. No mass deaths followed. Yet absence continued its quiet work. People left without farewell, drifting away to other quarters, other towns, compelled by a restlessness they could not explain. Rooms emptied without drama. Streets thinned gradually, never enough to alarm, always enough to feed what waited below. Stone remembered. It always had. The foundations beneath the quarter grew smoother from within, surfaces polished by contact that no human hand could trace. Channels formed where none had been cut, running between cellars and under streets, linking spaces that should have remained separate. The city learned to move its substance, to redistribute what it took so no single place appeared hollow for long. By the time anyone understood that the well had not been sealed but multiplied, the habit was complete. The quarter no longer needed a mouth. It had become one. And beneath the noise and growth of life above, the stone practiced consumption patiently, exact and unhurried, drinking the city from the inside while declaring itself whole. Centuries later, when the ground was broken for new foundations, the workers expected earth, stone, and perhaps the bones of forgotten paupers. Instead, the city itself had hollowed beneath their feet. The soil gave way too easily, revealing channels polished smooth from within, veins running deep and intricate, carrying nothing but darkness that seemed to pulse faintly with memory. The tunnels twisted and narrowed, curving in patterns that mocked the geometry of streets above, bending space in ways the mind refused to fully comprehend. Torchlight, flickering against slick walls, revealed surfaces that shone as if rubbed by countless hands, worn from centuries of careful attention, yet no hand had touched them in living memory. The air was thick and metallic, carrying the taste of copper, iron, and something older, deeper, a tang that settled in the throat and refused to be swallowed. At first, the workers thought it a natural cavity, some quirk of underground erosion or subterranean river long vanished. But the arrangement of what lay within told another story. Fingernails were stacked in perfect pyramids, pale as bone but unervingly smooth, catching the light like tiny obsidian crescents. Teeth were sorted in concentric rings, molars and canines aligned with obsessive precision, their enamel glinting wetly despite the age of the tunnels. Bone fragments were stripped to the smallest possible pieces, carefully placed as though each had been measured, inspected, and filed to fit some design beyond comprehension. No mud, no sediment, no trace of the builders who had once raised the city above, only a careful, deliberate order that mocked understanding. The tunnels contracted imperceptibly as they descended, walls pulsing faintly with a rhythm that mirrored the steps of those above, as if the city itself remembered the weight of every foot that had walked its streets centuries before. As workers descended, a sensation began to spread among them, subtle at first, then insistent. The ground seemed alive, patient and deliberate, swallowing sound and time. Every movement echoed oddly, not backward but inward, compressed and drawn along the tunnels. Hands that brushed the walls felt a slow, creeping warmth, like flesh beneath stone, and a trace of oil that did not belong to any tool. Breathing became difficult, not from dust, not from airlessness, but from an internal pressure that seemed to tighten the chest and press the lungs flat, insisting that the body participate in something ancient and unseen. A faint whisper threaded through the darkness, too low to catch with ears, more a vibration through bone and sinew, measuring, calculating, taking stock. As torchlight flickered across the walls, the extent of the hollowing became clear. Veins branched endlessly, each channel filled with more arrangements, nails, teeth, splintered bone, all organized with the same obsessive care. The numbers became impossible to grasp. What had begun as a single well now sprawled beneath the city like a root system, an organism vast and patient, consuming slowly, deliberately, without need of notice. And the realization dawned, late and horrifying. The well had never been merely a place, a hole in stone to draw water. It had been a mouth, learning, practicing, feeding on the city itself. The longer the men stayed, the more the sensation grew that the tunnels were not just hollowed, but aware. Each step pressed against unseen surfaces that adjusted beneath them, as though walls remembered their weight, their shape, their intent. The air carried impressions of vanished bodies, whispers of those long taken, a memory pressed into every stone and grain of soil. Torchlight revealed shadows where none should exist, elongated forms that tracked their progress and recoiled when approached, only to return again, patient and exact. The veins beneath the city seemed to pulse with understanding, growing wider where fear was strongest, contracting where curiosity lingered too long. Men began to disappear in small, inexplicable ways. A hand drawn into a tunnel while adjusting a rope. A foot slipping over a polished stone that gave way silently. And always, the taste of copper and iron filled the mouth, coating teeth and tongue, leaving a residue that no amount of washing could remove. It was not hunger, not revenge, not malice. It was teaching. The city beneath Paris had learned to drink, and it drank slowly, invisibly, drawing life through centuries, expanding until the living above became part of its system, their essence measured and stored with a precision that defied reason. By the end of the first day, the surviving workers understood the impossibility of extraction. The tunnels had no bottom, no terminus, no end. They led only further, deeper, endlessly, each channel a conduit for the careful consumption of all that had once walked the streets above. And in that moment, clarity arrived like a blade. The well, the quarter, the city itself had never been passive, had never been inert. It had been awake, patient beyond comprehension, drinking Paris from within, teaching every stone, every foundation, every human habit to submit, to thin, to vanish. When they tried to leave, the passageways had changed. Doors that had led to stairwells now opened into polished channels. Steps doubled back on themselves, twisting the geometry of memory and expectation. The air inside pressed not only on lungs but on thought, bending attention, stretching fear into careful, precise dread. The city above remained unaware, bustling, ordinary, but the veins below moved like a living mouth, remembering every pulse, every heartbeat, every step, until the city itself had grown deep enough to swallow anyone who lived upon it. And those who survived carried the lesson with them forever. The well had never been a hole in stone. It had been a mouth that taught Paris to drink itself, slowly, invisibly, until the living were measured, absorbed, and folded into the architecture of consumption, leaving nothing safe, nothing untouched, and nothing capable of forgetting the hunger beneath their feet.